So good afternoon, everyone. I think there will be people gradually joining us from the outside. So today is the first Sunday of the month. We hold our peace discussion centering right now on the Middle East crisis. So we have Lee Greer here behind me, and I believe Laura is also joining us. Whoever else is joining us on Zoom. So, all right, so let's get started. So good afternoon, everyone. I think there will be people gradually joining us from the outside. So today is the first Sunday of the month. We hold our peace discussion centering right now on the Middle East crisis. So we have Lee Greer here behind me, and I believe Laura is also joining us. Whoever else is joining us on Zoom. So, all right, so let's get started. Okay, so now we're going to start. Lee Greer will be monitoring this session, or at least giving us an update of what's going on in the Middle East.
Thank you, Grace, and everyone, and Laura, and you and the UUCR family. If you'll give me permission to share screen, I will. Thank you. I'll be much obliged. Thank you. We are now in, and I appreciate that we have the chalice of remembrance there for where we for those who have passed since we last met. Shall we say that that one of the great tragedies is of course how many dead there are now in the genocide in Gaza against Palestinians in Gaza. And this is behind the times. This is as of the 23rd of February, and it's a conservative figure, 38,000 killed, of whom 14,350 are children, of course, lots of women and lots of civilians. Multitudes injured, 2 million displaced. And of course, we have recently had the Flower Massacre, which occurred, and Euromed is now able to confirm that the IDF was directly and instrumentally involved in that massacre, despite the denials and all which came before. Also, we have a martyr that is from our shores as well, whom we want to memorialize the sacrifice of, and that is Aaron Bushnell, a U.S. Air Force airman who went in front of 25 years old, a beautiful young man who was apparently, according to the reportage of Max Blumenthal, was facing deployment to the Middle East to help and assist in this ugly operation which is happening, this genocidal operation which is happening. And he said, I can no longer be a participant in genocide. And he self-immolated, poured a volatile liquid upon himself, and in front of the Israeli embassy set himself alight. This is reminiscent of similar events which occurred during the Vietnam War, where people made the ultimate sacrifice to protest the evils of the actions happening at their time. His last words were shouted and then screamed, "Free Palestine." before he fell unconscious. And he is recognized the world over. He has brought it with intense shock and sadness, and as Ali Abu Nima of Electronic Intifada said, with awe at this individual who made this sacrifice, a sacrifice which he said was small compared to the sacrifices that the Palestinian people are making right now. I also wanted to, because it's International Women's Month, I did want to briefly thank everyone who made the particularly Alec for his writing of the story of the remarkable women who contributed to science memorialized in our service, which just happened. A couple others that I would add to there, of course, Emmy Noether her contributions are towering contributions, and yet she is far less famous than people who did far less for science than she did. As Alec pointed out, the whole foundations of modern physics are based on Emmy Noether's theorems and the relation of laws of conservation with symmetry, and her own mentor David Hilbert, who tried to promote her in ways that he could, despite the prejudice. He himself was robbed of credit when his contribution to the covariant equations that became general relativity were culturally lifted, were appropriated and put under somebody else's name. Also, I want to remember Mileva Maric, whose name should be recommended, a mathematician and a physicist, whose name should be associated with the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the photoelectric effect. She, in fact, submitted as the sole author the paper that became the photoelectric effect, for which another was given the Nobel Prize. And he passed the money to her because not only because of an ugly divorce, but because she actually was the author of the paper with the photoelectric effect, Mileva Maric. And you'll know who she is when you know that her married name was Einstein. She was the Serbian first wife of Albert. So, and then of course Jocelyn Bell, who discovered pulsars with Martin Hewish, her PhD advisor, was given the Nobel Prize instead of her, as Sir Fred Hoyle protested, created acrimonious feelings, and he himself was denied the Nobel Prize, which was given to Willie Fowler on fusion of the heavier elements in stellar furnaces. So in science, like elsewhere, these things can be political. And of course, Maurice Wilkins, who was awarded the Nobel Prize with Watson and Crick, he was the one that helped appropriate Rosalind Franklin's work. And injustices like this should be recognized, including in the fields of science. And I'm not shy to say, even though as a scientist, I'm proud of science's contributions, I'm not scared of airing our dirty laundry. So, and I offered to give a full talk on this, a full service grace on the whole issue of further women who have contributed to science for Women's Remembrance Month. So there has also come to be another set of happenings at the International at the International Court of Justice. Another case has been brought, not in addition to South Africa's case against Israel for genocide against the people of Palestine in Gaza, and that has been a case on the occupation in the occupied territories, and more than 50 nations have contributed briefs to that current case, which is now pending before the International Criminal Court. I'm sorry, the International Court of Justice, the ICCJ. Why don't I just throw quickly up there? Let's see, here we are. So I can give a review of that briefly, and then I'd love to open it up for discussion and questions. Okay, so under apartheid, which of course there's the 1973 International Convention against Apartheid. That's where I've included the update on enlightenmentlegacy.net on this particular court case, which is pending. It's under international humanitarian law, for which there is a great repository at the International Red Cross. So international, just let me get down to the right spot. There we go, international humanitarian law. And this set of hearings happened on February 19th through 26, 2024. They're broadcast on United Nations TV, and these hearings went through many briefs filed by many nations, noting, and the title of this lawsuit was Legal Consequences Arising from the Policies and Practices of Israel in the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem. And this is separate from the case under the Genocide Convention. Okay, and many countries have supported. Also, it is important to remember that the country of Nicaragua, which I have not yet posted about, has brought a case against the Republic of Germany for supporting Israel in and being an accomplice to genocide, which makes Germany, for the third time in a century, involved in genocide yet again. Okay, Germany in the Namibian genocide at the turn of the 20th century in southern Africa, and then of course with the Nazi Holocaust during World War II, and yet again in the genocide against Palestine in Gaza in the 21st century. So within a little bit over a century, Germany, unrepentant, not learning the lessons, is yet involving itself in genocide again. And at that point, I open it up to discussion. Remember that you'll have to use the mic or I will not be able to hear you, those of us who are remote.
So I had a question about the UN, what is it? The UN group that people are saying was infiltrated by Hamas.
Yeah.
I needed some clarification.
Yes, well, UNRWA, that is UNRWA, which was a UN agency established specifically after the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of the first major ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Well, it wasn't the first, but it was the first major one, ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 1948 with establishment of the Tel Aviv regime to take care of Palestinian refugees, of whom there were about 750,000. That there was an accusation right at that time, and it was dreamed up by the Tel Aviv regime, accusing some members of a 30,000 member agency, about 12 members they accused of having been connected with the atrocity of October 7th, where Hamas made incursions into Israel from Gaza. Those 12 employees against whom all allegations were made were in fact let go by UNRWA. It is important to recognize that Israel has long wanted to abolish UNRWA because they do not want aid to go to Palestinians. Uh, have not. They want to complete the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, as the Likud party platform has made clear since 1977, when the right-wing Likud party first came to power within Israel. And it turns out that the allegations quickly fell apart and went down to 3 employees, uh, and even there are questions because there's what we're dealing with is an ongoing case of what is called hasbara, or propaganda, from the Tel Aviv regime. And the question is, why should a 30,000 employee agency, which was helping to keep Palestinian refugees alive, be targeted right at the time they were needed most, particularly with allegations which have not panned out. So it's another horrifying injustice in this ugly situation with which we are faced.
Something that I think should be talked about that we have found out recently. I think I've spoken about the importance of um, not necessarily believing the American news and everything you hear from them. And I don't know if folks saw the recent article from The Intercept called "Between the Hammer and the Anvil" that talked about a lot of the discussions that we are having right now about sexual abuse happening that Hamas is supposedly doing and has been doing, supposedly systematically since October 7th. There were stories that people were systematically raped on October 7th, and it has happened since. And these stories come from a New York Times article that now has been shown by this article in The Intercept to be really just made up. The lack of evidence was proof that they were hiding evidence. And now it looks like, I think the IDF was involved in that New York Times article, that we actually have IDF soldiers writing our news, or
Yep.
at least heavily involved in it. I wondered if, Lee, if you had heard anything about that story, maybe want to talk about it. I think that's something that's really important to kind of bring up and discuss.
Oh, absolutely. That's completely true. That's a very important case. A very sensational story was published in the New York Times. The author, in fact, was not a journalist. How she got a job at the New York Times, this prestigious journal, this prestigious newspaper, uh, without being a journalist herself and actually having a background in Israeli intelligence. She was one of the Hasbara units in Israeli propaganda / intelligence, one of the two, uh, and she collaborated with Jeffrey Gettleman, who was the author of that, and that has completely fallen apart, not only from the work of The Intercept, but also from the work of the team at Electronic Intifada. And it was brought into question weeks ago, and the story has steadily fallen apart. What's even worse, though, is it hides, well, 2 things that it hides. The actual hostages, which have been released by Hamas, the Israeli citizens who have been released, women and girls, have specifically talked about the great respect which was shown to them by the Al-Qassam fighters brigades. That's the military wing of Hamas. All right. for them as women, not even, not even touching them physically. Okay. And that is in stark contrast to numerous incidences that are being reported, that reports are coming out of, but are not being reported in the Western media, of IDF sexual abuse, harassment, and rape that have been occurring with IDF members of both genders, I might say, within the incursions of the IDF into Gaza. That's the story that's being covered, while a fake story was put out and now debunked, even by the within the New York Times. What this is very reminiscent of is the whole Judith Miller scandal about weapons of mass destruction, which were placed in the New York Times to get us involved in the Iraq War in 2003. By the way, Judith Miller, of course, had many of the same connections, was connected with the neocons and all of that, and with policies which were advocated by the Project for a New American Century, which had a bunch of neocons in it, as well as the clean break papers out of Tel Aviv in the 90s to get the US involved in a series of wars within the Middle East, which, of course, since September 11th, 2001, we have been involved in. So again, that set of lies has fallen apart, but we're still not getting the real picture of where the real mass sexual abuse scandal is going on with the perpetrators from the IDF. Correct.
So we've had some news about food being airdropped now because of the whole fiasco on the ground. So is that a sign of maybe making some kind of progress against what's happening out there?
Yes, that is a sign of progress. No great kudos that the US is finally making some food drops, far too little to actually meet the need. Remember, we have over 2 million people there, right? Okay, far too little. And there still isn't a restart of UNRWA. Okay, what they're doing is saying, oh, we got to drop it from up here. They're still like treating the people of Gaza as animals. That's what's happening. Okay. All right. And would just do a few airdrops. But that shows the level of pressure under which the Biden administration is coming. And notice now, even the spokesman of from the Israeli government and all of that, from the Tel Aviv regime, are having to make some statements about letting in humanitarian aid and all of that, because now finally the Biden administration is starting to put a little bit of pressure on the Tel Aviv regime. But is it efficient parachuting pallets of aid into there? No, of course not. UNRWA should be allowed to take whole convoys in there, and they know how to distribute them. They've been doing that for years. Okay, they know how. Of course, the IDF is incompetent to distribute. They started shooting at people, who were crowding around to get food, trying to get flour and everything, and then tried to lie about it. So the level of dishonesty there, the level of mendacity in the whole thing is just really, really evident. And fine, drop some pallets in there. It's far too little. If the US wants to show its actual bona fides, the administration, it should refund UNRWA and provide protection for UNRWA going in there, and break the blockade of Israeli citizens and and settlers who have been dancing and singing and having picnics and preventing convoys of trucks from going in there. Okay, what you're seeing there in Israeli society right now by a huge majority, thankfully there are heroes who resist this trend, but there is a wave of genocidal madness which has swept Israeli culture and society right now, which is reminiscent of what Rwanda was like during the interim Hutu power government between April and July of 1994 during the Rwandan genocide. A temporary wave of madness which swept that country. A similar one, which is lasting longer, has swept the settler colonial state of the Tel Aviv regime.
Okay, yeah. Oh, Professor Lee, it's true that, what?
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
Professor Lee, is it true that the American presidents since Kennedy, they're all arms dealers? That's all they are. Israel controls our foreign policy according to KPFK in Los Angeles. So what good is all of it? What good is anything in this world?
Well, I would say that it's up to the American people to determine. The world depends on us as citizens of this country because this country has such imperial power around the world to retake control of our foreign policy, to make sure that we end the American empire so that a healthy American republic can once more emerge, or at least, or maybe emerge for the very first time. We have a moral responsibility as American citizens, and we don't get to absolve ourselves of our responsibility to demand that our leaders stop these imperial policies, not only in the Middle East but elsewhere in the world too. As far as American, yes, there has been, things have very much gone downhill since President Kennedy was assassinated in a coup d'état in the United States. Certainly, no president has really directly challenged the military-industrial complex very vigorously since that time, since the time of his assassination. So yes, there has been a definite change in the role of U.S. presidents since then.
Professor, is it true that the two men responsible for all this covert crap in the world are Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles? Is it true?
Well, not all of it. No, I mean, they certainly played a very crucial and harmful role, but they had a lot of help. So they had a lot of.
Thank you kindly. See ya. Okay.
Yeah. John Foster Dulles being the Secretary of State under Eisenhower, and Alan Dulles being the founding leader of the CIA. That's who he's referring to.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Thank you, everyone who stayed after to discuss the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. And but Laura, are you in on Zoom?
She is, yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Laura, how are you? Do you have anything to contribute to our conversation today?
I have heard this conflict is now considered an occupation. That Israel is, I mean, we look back at the French Algerian, and it was a French occupation. And I wanted to know if you think that's too severe of terminology, or how do you feel about that, Professor Lee?
No, not too severe a characterization at all. It is an occupation that has been going on 3/4 of a century, correct, and it has been genocidal from the beginning. It's just in a rapid phase of genocide now. It matches the characteristics of genocide from the great Raphael Lemkin's definition when he coined the term genocide. So he, of course, a Polish Jewish emigre, international human rights attorney who coined the term genocide and helped to create some of the definitional space that was eventually put into the Genocide Convention. Not too strong a word, no. And the parallels with the Algerian occupation, of course, the Algerian War for Independence from French occupation cost the lives of more than 1 million Algerians, and it is not too strong a terminology at all. Settler colonialism is what we have is the paradigm which best explains what we have here. And of course, settler colonialism, as the great Patrick Wolf showed in his 2006 paper, is predicated on the elimination of the indigenous people of a place. And when you see elimination of the native or of the indigenous people, what we are talking about is essentially genocide, correct?
Okay.
Thank you.
Your last comment there, Lee, made me think of a quote I wanted to read. Jabotinsky, one of the sort of founders of Zionism, in 1923. And this to me, this quote explains that they understood that that the opposition they got from the beginning in Israel was going to happen, and they understood that opposition would continue to happen. And they understood this when they started. And this is what Jabotinsky wrote in 1923. Every native population in the world resists colonists as long as it has the slightest hope of being able to rid itself of the danger of being colonized. That is what the Arabs in Palestine are doing, and what they will persist in doing as long as there remains a solitary spark of hope that they will be able to prevent the transformation of Palestine into Israel. And that is something Israel has tried to kill, that spark of hope, but they have been unable to. And so they've continually had to fight against it. And they knew this was going to happen, that when you come into a land and take their land, you're going to have people fighting against you until you leave.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. That's it. I love the honesty that is present in Jabotinsky's terms there. Also, my favorite endorser of Zionism was named Adolf Eichmann, who was an architect of the Holocaust. And he said, if I was Jewish, I would be a fanatical Zionist. Thank you, Adolf. You've shown the parallels between the two ideologies there.
So before we close the session, was there anyone else who wanted to make any comments? No. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for joining us here today. And hopefully we can continue these talks in the future. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.